Aloha, folks, and welcome to this latest edition of Five Questions. It is a conversation that we have with newsmakers all around the country and also here at home. Today, we're fortunate to be chatting with Craig Smith, who is an author and also bringing to us inflationdeception.com, incredible information about our economy and beyond. And Craig, thank you so much for joining us today, and aloha.
Aloha, Rick. It's great to be back with you.
Thank you very much, sir. Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself, Craig?
Well, I'm chairman of Swiss America Trading Corporation. I started the company 30 years ago out of the bedroom of my home with $50, and it's grown into a company that's done several $1 billion worth of business throughout the years, so we've kind of lived the American dream. In the mid-'80s, I started writing books, and they culminated into my first book, True Wealth, which then led into my second book, Rediscovering Gold in the 21st Century, that I released in 1999. At the time, I suggested that gold was way too underpriced, and we probably see it go much higher. Of course, we now have gold at $1,600, so that one looked pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Then I released a book called Black Gold Stranglehold, The Myth of Scarcity and the Politics of Oil, where we argued that one day, that was 2005, or one day we'd see oil above $100 a barrel, and 2 years later, of course, it was $147 a barrel. And then we did Crashing the Dollar October of last year, where we said we're in a currency crisis and that all the currencies around the world are racing to the bottom. And our most recent book, The Inflation Deception, actually explains to the American people what inflation is and how governments can use it to deceive the citizens to gain what they want as a government, not what we the people want as a society. And so that's kind of a thumbnail sketch, Rick, of who I am and what I've done.
Sounds very good, and I like to invite folks to go to inflationdeception.com, and you can learn more in all regards to our discussion with Craig. And you touched upon our first question already, Craig, and that is exactly what is the inflation deception, and importantly, how does it relate to our everyday lives?
Well, Rick, I think most people, when you talk about inflation, they think of it in terms as, I used to pay $3 a gallon for gasoline, and now I pay $4, so therefore, we have inflation. That's what's referred to as price inflation. But true inflation is actually a monetary phenomenon. In other words, we create money that is not needed in an economy because a central bank is supposed to create money while an economy is expanding and remove money when an economy is contracting. What most people don't understand is that we created $2.7 trillion out of the financial mess in 2008. And while that money has not gotten into the system because it's being held by banks and by businesses because of uncertainty in Washington, when that money gets into the system, we will have price inflation. So we discuss how monetary inflation works and how price inflation works. Now, of course, what we want as citizens is to look at how price inflation affects us. Well, we can see that very clearly. When I was a kid, you could buy a brand new car for $1,900. Today, that car is $19,000. Many of us can remember back when you could go to a movie for $1.50. Today, they're $7 or $8. That's what price inflation is. And what it means to the average American, Rick, is that what it costs us to live today, our cost of living, is going to be much more in years to come. I mean, many of us, when I first got married 34 years ago, I had a $77 a month house payment, and I was living on probably less than $1,000 a month. Nowadays, that would put you at poverty level. So we try and explain to people how inflation works and how to best position yourself to make sure you understand inflation and how to make sure that as your cost of living goes up, you can cover that cost of living. For years, Rick, our real wages have not kept up with inflation. But because our homes kept going up in value, we didn't feel it. We had equity in our homes, therefore we had savings, so we didn't feel it. Well, all of a sudden in 2007, when the real estate market started dropping, all of a sudden our equities disappeared, and next thing we realized how far behind the curve we were as it related to real wages and inflation. So we tackled that in a very interesting way. We wrote the book like a novel, although it is actual fact. We try to take the person through what a person by the name of Peggy and Ryan went through in their life and what they discovered once they uncovered what inflation was truly about.
You had mentioned earlier as well, and we'll maybe even tie this into question number 2 about inflatocracy, but you also mentioned the element that this is an orchestrated event by government for a specific end or a specific objective. Is that correct?
Yeah, it sure is, Rick. And it's when America made the turn to the left, if you will, and decided that we were going to become a welfare nation. I mean, the Founding Fathers never intended for us to take care of every person that was in trouble. We believed in hand-ups, but we didn't believe in handouts.
Mm-hmm.
We saw it start under Franklin Roosevelt with Social Security as a direct result of the Great Depression, and then Lyndon Johnson in '64 with the Great Society, and has been evolving ever since. The problem with a welfare state, Rick, is that we used to be on a gold standard. It's impossible to maintain a welfare state because you have to continue to increase spending. So Nixon took us off the gold standard in 1971, 7 years after Mr. Johnson started the Great Society. So in order that we could continue to create money through the device of inflation. That's why we call it now, it's no longer a democracy, it's an inflatocracy. And we inflate, we cause money that we can put in the political leaders' hands so they can buy favor with special groups by handouts so that they can get reelected. It's a horrible cycle, Rick. I mean, think about it. If 50% of all Americans don't pay any federal income tax and they're actually getting something from a government, they're more likely to vote for people that are going to give them more goodies.
Mm-hmm.
The other 50% are going to vote just the opposite way. We can't continue this path, Rick. We have more people sitting in the cart now than we have pulling the cart, and that's a formula for destruction. So an inflatocracy is a government who uses money to shape the social structure of America without having to do it with legislation.
We're talking with Craig Smith and thoroughly enjoying 5 Questions with Craig. You can learn more at inflationdeception.com. When we talk about debt and deficit, Craig, leads us to question number 3. What is the reality, maybe even working definitions of, our nation's debt and deficit? What are the implications again? Back to us.
Well, of course, debt, when it's used properly, Rick, can be a wonderful thing, but unfortunately, when it's used improperly, it can be a horrible thing and can lead to bankruptcies. And we have been running deficits basically in this nation since the late 70s. We saw it in 78, 79. There were times we got the deficits under control, like the end of the Clinton years. But all in all, we have been increasing our deficits over time. In 1971, the United States government had a national debt. That means the deficit spending every year that we couldn't pay for. We had a national debt of $300 billion. Today we have a national debt of $14.3 trillion, and we're soon going to raise it to $17 trillion. Rick, that's more dollar bills than God has created in seconds of time since Adam and Eve walked in the Garden of Eden.
Exactly.
For Pete's sakes.
Right.
So we cannot continue on that path. Using debt and deficits allows you to live a life that just is not based in reality. It's much like a drug, Rick. A drug can, if you take it into your body, will give you a false sense of security. Yet when that drug wears off, you deal with reality. So you either have to increase the dosages to get the same effect, or you have to go cold turkey. And we talk about this in the book. We actually talk about the physiological issues that go on in your mind when you use debt. That's what causes shopaholics. Well, we have spendaholics in Washington, D.C. that use it for a power structure. So to answer your question, if debt is used properly, it's a wonderful tool. You buy a home, you pay it off over 30 years, you have a place to live. But our government has used it improperly. They use it to gain power and change society. It's not helping us, it's hurting us, and the time has come for us to get it under control.
You are listening to 5 Questions here on HawaiiReporter.com, also KHVHradio.com, and we thank you very much for choosing us and joining us and here on KHVH Radio. Disquieting stuff, Craig. I got to tell you, it really is daunting, and I'm going to transfer over to question number 4. And that is media and information. What's your insight and opinion on the education level of Americans today, economically speaking? And secondarily to that, are we getting a service or a disservice by major media in the explanation of and the revelation of these stories?
Well, obviously that would call for some speculation on my behalf, Rick, but I can say that America was less than informed for several years because we were really controlled by 3 major news networks and a couple of major newspapers. However, with the increase of the Internet and with alternative radio sources and even wonderful venues like this, like the Hawaii Reporter, you're able to bring information to people that they would normally not receive. So I think the positive, Rick, is that people are becoming more informed. They're spending more time listening to programs like yours or spending time on websites like this where they can get alternative opinions. And I think that's a plus. I think it's important, though, that the American people really start to get engaged. You know, it's time for us kind of to turn off the television. That's what I love about talk radio. Think about it. It makes people think because you take the visual away. And, you know, for so many years in America, we've focused on amusement. Well, that comes from the word muse, meaning to stop thinking and to entertain ourselves, okay? We need to stop entertaining ourselves and start thinking, because believe it or not, we all have a stake in this great experiment called the United States of America. And as you know from us talking before, Rick, I believe the brightest days of this nation could lie ahead of us if we get honest lawmakers, if we pass reasonable legislation like balanced budget amendments. I mean, I can't even imagine that's a discussion. We all should have to balance our
Definitely,
budget.
right.
And so I think it's positive. And if we can continue this and more Americans get engaged in the process, I think the future could be bright. If we don't, and we allow these rascals in Washington, D.C. to continue to run unchecked, I think we're going to hit a what some people are calling an apocalyptic end. I don't think it's going to be that desperate, quite frankly, but we're going to have to go through some pain before the bright skies come back.
Our final question, Craig, and again, thank you for that insight, is about solutions. And do you find that there are, and again, hopefully having individuals who are focused and dedicated to real solutions to our issues? What are the political and financial solutions to what ails us?
Well, Rick, I know this is going to sound very basic and very simple, but it really starts with the American people sending to Washington, D.C. honest lawmakers who truly have the future of the country on their hearts and not their next election cycle. I mean, you know, we have fundamental changes that need to be made, and those changes have to come from an apolitical position. They can't be thought of in terms of politics. They have to be thought of in terms of what's best for the nation. So it starts with us having some honest lawmakers in Washington, D.C. I also believe that we need to have a more fair tax system. You know, with less than 50% of all Americans not even paying any federal income tax, if we're going to raise tax on the rich, as they call it, which is a misnomer, we do a whole program on that, then I think we should start making people that pay zero taxes pay some taxes. All of us should have a stake in this game. We should have balanced budget amendments. Look, the American people are wise, Rick. They know that we have profligate spenders in Washington, D.C. They know the average American family has to balance their budget. We have to learn to live within our means. The government should be a representation of the people. If we have to do it, they should have to do it. And good leadership starts by leading by example. It's time Washington, D.C. realized the responsibility they have to the American people is more than just good speeches, but actually leading by example. And I hope that is going to be the message we hear out of Washington, D.C. I know it started in 2010. Hopefully we can hear it in 2012 and beyond.
We cannot thank you enough, Craig, the conversation and the contribution. We thank you so very much. Again, remind us where we can find you and where we can obtain the very latest copy of your book.
The best place to go is inflationdeception.com. It's all one word, inflationdeception.com. And they should have that button fixed now, Rick, where at certain periods of time when you go there, you should be able to get a complimentary copy. The publisher actually pays the postage on it. We're kind of like that shoe dealer. You know, for every one book we sell, we give a book away. So we're wanting to inform the American people, and that's why I so much appreciate, Rick, what you do for Hawaii and for your community. You tackle issues that many other hosts are not willing to tackle, and so we want to add our efforts to yours. So just go to inflationdeception.com. It'll tell you everything you need to know.
You know, we thank you so very much, Craig. I hope you don't mind if we call upon you again, and continued success and great work. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Rick.
Aloha. Bye now.
Bye.
Craig Smith of inflationdeception.com on this edition of 5 Questions. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.